All right, today I would like to show you how to cut out sort of a normal size tenon. I guess you could call this a small to medium tenon. When I'm making workbenches and I'm working on large parts, I do things in a little bit different order to cut down on the amount of work that I have to do. But this is, 90% of your woodworking is going to be parts that are about 3/4 to an inch thick. Or even smaller, and you're not going to need to do anything special to work around extra thickness. We've got this thing laid out on all four sides. This is a tenon that has 4 cheeks and 4 shoulders. I've done the entire layout, so I've got my shoulder line here. I've got all of my cheek cuts laid out across the top on either side, and I'm going to do all the rib cuts first. So let's start there. We talked about in the other video on how to start a cut, how to stand. I've got my open stance, I've got a loose grip, I've got my finger pointed down the saw plate and my thumb here, and I'm going to just start with floating over the surface and just start to cut. Okay, so now I'm not going to just saw straight down. The reason this part is tilted is because I'm going to advance down this line and make sort of a starter kerf before I try to go the other side. I only want to advance on one face at a time. So I've got this little notch. That'll keep the tip of the saw plate kind of under control. And I'm just going to work my way back and drop the heel of the plate. Okay, I'm using really short strokes. I know I told you in an earlier video to think that the saw plate is twice as long as it is, but that's because I'm just trying to have lots of control. So now I've got a kerf that runs the whole length of this cut. That's going to keep the saw plate from wandering in this face while I advance on that face. So I'm going to do that, flatten my saw out a bit, nibble and blow. Okay, so I left a little bit of stock here. I think I got a little bit out of line. We talked about saw set and plate thickness, and this is kind of a finely set saw, so I can't just tweak it in the cut. So I'm going to actually try to saw with the side of the teeth here, try to remove a little bit of that material on the line so that when I come back and clean up that cut, finish the cut, I can get a straight cut. Okay, now I'm closer to the knife line. So at this point, what it looks like inside this part is I've got a saw kerf like this and a saw kerf like that. Now I'm going to connect these 2 points. So I'm going to cut my way down here and cut my first triangle out. Now I have these 2 saw kerfs to guide the plate. I don't really have to steer the saw that much. I just have to get everything lined up and get out of the way. Okay, so I've made this cut. I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing on this side of the cut, and I'm going to use, since I don't have a really wide place to put my thumb, I'm going to use that little trick I showed you about putting a notch in here to help me start this cut. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to advance on one face at a time. Okay, connect the dots. Okay, now we just need to reposition the part. So we had removed that material there. Now we need to work our way down this face, and we're going to basically make a cut like this. So we're pulling out this little triangle right here. First I advance on this face, then I connect the dots. I don't need to cut a notch here because I've already got the kerf on the backside to start from. Okay, now we can stand it vertical and saw out this last triangle here. So I have a tendency when I'm sawing to kind of rock the saw like this. And so what happens when you do that is you end up with sort of a little bit of material there that's kind of swelling in the center. So sometimes it's a bigger cut, bigger tenon. You can put the toe of the saw plate in there and just kind of make sure you get that without having to worry about going over your shoulders, your baselines here. So you can see I'm struggling a little bit in this. So you can see I'm struggling a little bit with this cut. It's because my two cuts may have been out of plane a little bit. So I've actually got to cut a path for the saw to move through before I can start cutting the material away. Okay, so now we're going to repeat the process on the short direction. Clearance here. And you saw on this one I got out over my ski tips just a little bit. I was starting to make the cut to come on down. I wanted to just, finish that cut, but if it's important to be accurate, flip it around so you can see the line. Okay, now we can get our bench hooks out and do the cross cutting. Okay, I've got my bench hooks out. You did make a set of bench hooks, right? I mean, there's a video out there, you can make those. And this is where if you had a pair of carcass saws or tenon saws, you would switch from the rip saw to the crosscut saw. I've got a hybrid filed saw, so I can use them for both cuts. The first thing you want to do is, the first thing I like to do is I like to start with the narrowest cuts first. That makes it less work to cut these long ones, but it also, right now I've got the longest sight line I'm going to get for this cut, and so I'm more likely to have an accurate cut if I have a long sight line. So I start with the two short ones first, and then I'll switch to the wide ones. If you're just making a cut, and you're planning on maybe chiseling to the baseline, you can just cut like a regular old cross cut. You got to make sure you get a good pressure on the bottom of the board. It'll rotate like it did to me there. Okay, so that's the first cut. Flip it over, make another cut. you can hear the pitch change. The scrap is vibrating, the offcuts are vibrating, and the saw plate is vibrating, and the pitch will change. So let me show you another trick. If you need to try to get as close to your baseline as possible and you want to have a nice, neat, crisp shoulder line, you can use a chisel. There's a couple ways you can do it. You can just sort of drag the point of the corner of the chisel along near the shoulder line, and it'll just pop a little bit of material up. Then come back, get the shoulder on that baseline, and deepen that knife cut. And then make another pass across the grain. The other thing you can do, kind of a janky setup here, but you need to be able to secure the work without using your hand on this side of the chisel. So if I was doing a bunch of parts where I was going to do this sort of Class A baseline, I would have just grabbed a hold fast before I put my bench hooks up here, and I would have done this step first. So rather than go across the grain like this, you could also just sort of wiggle the chisel in at an angle and remove some material, and then you get that one-sided V-cut. It's straight on the shoulder line side and angled on the waist side. So that's how that would look. And you may have noticed that I'm always starting at the far side, and that's important when you're making, especially when you're making really big cuts. You need to be able to work your way back down this line to establish that initial kerf before you start making the full cut. And starting on the far end of the cut means that you can see what's behind the plate. If you tilt the plate like this, then the plate tends to block your view. So I'm starting the plate, I'm dropping the heel, blow a little dust out of the way. Now I've got a full length kerf set up, and I can just cut away. And I've got a rough cut tenon. There's a little bit of work to do to clean it up and fit it for the mortise, but you've got a rough cut tenon and you're ready to go.